Ambassador Zexthul clicked his mandibles in satisfaction as he reviewed the intelligence reports on his datapad. The crystalline display showed detailed scans of the third planet in this unremarkable solar system, a world the inhabitants called Earth. Blue and green swirled together on its surface, with white clouds drifting lazily across continents. It looked peaceful, harmless, perfect. "Sir," his aide, a nervous klaxon named Vril, approached with hesitant steps. "The preliminary cultural analysis is complete. Should I transmit it to the Hegemony Council?" Zexthul's 4 eyes never left the planetary display. "Summarize it first. I want to ensure we're dealing with what I think we're dealing with." Vril's tentacles trembled slightly as he accessed his own datapad. The species calls itself humanity. Bipedal mammals, carbon-based, surprisingly uniform in basic biology despite surface variations. Average lifespan of roughly 80 local years. They've achieved basic spaceflight but haven't mastered faster-than-light travel yet. Weapons technology? Primitive by our standards. Kinetic projectiles, crude chemical explosives, some atomic weapons. Nothing that would threaten even our oldest warship designs. Vril paused, checking his notes. They appear to be fragmented into numerous political entities. We count over 200 separate nation-states, many in active conflict with each other. Zexthul's mandibles clicked again, this time in amusement. Ah, the classical pre-contact civilization, divided, primitive, and completely unaware of their place in the cosmic order. How delightfully typical. The ambassador's species, the Veltar, had been part of the galactic hegemony for over 3,000 years. They'd seen this pattern countless times before. A young species, barely crawling out of their home system, thinking they were alone in the universe. The hegemony would make contact, offer membership, and another world would join the peaceful collective that spanned half the galaxy. "Any notable defensive capabilities?" Zexthul asked, though he already knew the answer. "Minimal space-based infrastructure, some orbital platforms, primitive satellites. Their largest vessel appears to be a research station they call the International Space Station. It's roughly the size of our smallest courier ships." Vril's voice carried a note of dismissive superiority. "Our initial contact protocols should proceed without complications." Zexthul stood, his 2-meter frame casting a long shadow across the bridge of the diplomatic vessel Harmony's voice. Through the forward viewport, Earth hung like a jewel against the black of space. Such a beautiful world. It would make an excellent addition to the hegemony's collection. "Excellent. Begin standard integration procedures. Make contact with their largest political entity and inform them of our intentions." "Sir?" Vril looked confused. "Shouldn't we follow the usual diplomatic channels? The standard first contact protocols require us to—" "The protocols were written for species that might pose some form of threat," Zexthul interrupted, waving a dismissive hand. "Look at these creatures, Vril. They can't even agree among themselves long enough to unify their own world. They're killing each other with rocks and pointed sticks compared to our technology. Why waste months on delicate negotiations when we can simply inform them of their new status?" Vril's tentacles twitched nervously. "The Hegemony Council prefers the gradual approach. It reduces cultural shock, and the Hegemony Council delegates field operations to beings like me for a reason," Zexthul snapped. "I've been managing first contact scenarios since before you were spawned. These humans will thank us for bringing them into the galactic community. Eventually." The ambassador moved to his command console and began inputting commands. The ship's sophisticated translation systems had been monitoring human communications for months. Every language, every cultural nuance, every political structure had been cataloged and analyzed. The humans would receive their message in perfect, unaccented versions of their most widely spoken languages. "Prepare a general broadcast," Zexthul ordered. Direct it to every communications satellite and government facility on the planet. I want every leader, every military commander, every person of influence to receive this simultaneously. Sir, that's rather dramatic. Wouldn't a private communication to selected leaders be more appropriate? Zexthul's laugh was a harsh, chittering sound. Dramatic? My dear Vril, sometimes the best diplomacy is the kind that makes a clear and unmistakable impression. These humans need to understand their situation immediately. No confusion, no room for misinterpretation, no possibility of some foolish leader thinking they can negotiate from a position of strength. The bridge crew, all Veltar with the occasional klaxon at support stations, worked efficiently to prepare the transmission. They'd done this dozens of times before with other primitive species. The routine was well established. Broadcasting in 3, 2, 1, transmission active, announced the communications officer. Across Earth, every television station, radio network, and internet connection suddenly carried the same message. In the United Nations building in New York, the Security Council meeting came to an abrupt halt as screens filled with the image of Ambassador Zexthul. In the Pentagon, generals paused their strategic briefings. In the Kremlin, Moscow, Beijing, London, Tel Aviv, and every other capital city on the planet, leaders stopped what they were doing to stare at their screens. Greetings. Inhabitants of the planet you call Earth, Zexthul began, his translated words appearing simultaneously in hundreds of languages. I am Ambassador Zexthul of the Galactic Hegemony, representing the unified government of over 40,000 worlds. We have been observing your species for some time and have determined that you have reached the minimum threshold for inclusion in our collective. The ambassador paused, allowing the translation systems to catch up across multiple languages. He wanted his next words to be perfectly clear. Effective immediately, Earth is now a protectorate of the Galactic Hegemony. Your various governmental systems will be dissolved and replaced with a single planetary administration that answers directly to the Hegemony Council. This transition is not optional, nor is it negotiable. Resistance will be discouraged. In the White House Situation Room, President Martinez stared at the screen in disbelief. Around the table, cabinet members and military advisors exchanged shocked glances. This had to be some kind of elaborate hoax, but the signal was coming from everywhere at once. Every satellite, every network, every communication system on the planet was carrying this message. Furthermore, Zexthul continued, your species demonstrates several concerning aggressive tendencies. Your history is filled with warfare, conquest, and violence. This will not be tolerated under hegemony law. All military forces will be disbanded, all weapons research will cease, and all aggressive technologies will be surrendered for destruction. The camera angle widened to show more of the alien ship's bridge. The technology was clearly far beyond anything Earth possessed. Holographic displays, crew members of obviously non-human species, and systems that hummed with barely contained power. You have 72 of your standard hours to begin compliance. Hegemony peacekeepers will arrive shortly to assist with the transition process. Do not attempt to resist. Your primitive weapons cannot harm our vessels, and any aggressive action will be met with appropriate force. General Patterson, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, leaned forward across the table. Mr. President, we need to treat this as a real threat until proven otherwise. I recommend we go to DEFCON 2 immediately. President Martinez nodded grimly. Agreed. Contact all Allied commands. I want every military leader on the planet brought up to speed immediately. Back on the Harmony's voice, Zexthul was warming to his subject. This was the part he enjoyed most about first contact scenarios. The moment when a species realized how small and insignificant they truly were in the greater cosmos. Let me be absolutely clear about your situation, he continued. Your species has developed in isolation, believing yourselves to be alone in the universe. This has led to an inflated sense of your own importance and capabilities. You have spent your brief existence fighting amongst yourselves over resources that the hegemony considers barely worth cataloging. The ambassador gestured to something off-screen, and a holographic display appeared showing comparative technology assessments. Human spacecraft looked like crude toys next to sleek hegemony designs. Human weapons were primitive clubs compared to hegemony energy weapons. Your most powerful weapons could not scratch the hull of our smallest courier vessel. Your fastest spacecraft would take thousands of years to reach the nearest hegemony world. Your computational systems are roughly equivalent to what we consider children's toys. In short, you are a species of clever but ultimately harmless primitives. In military command centers around Earth, officers were coming to the same grim conclusion. Radar stations had detected the alien vessel hours ago, but it was unlike anything in their databases. It was massive, easily 10 times larger than the biggest human-built spacecraft, and it was holding position in Earth orbit without any visible means of propulsion. "Sir," Vril whispered to his superior, "perhaps we should allow them some time to process this information before making further demands?" Zexthul waved him off. "Nonsense. The sooner they accept their new reality, the easier this process will be for everyone involved." He turned back to the camera. "Your compliance process will begin with the following immediate actions. First, all nuclear weapons will be powered down and prepared for collection. Second, all military vessels and aircraft will return to their bases and remain there. Third, all government officials will remain in their current positions pending replacement by hegemony-approved administrators." The message continued for another 10 minutes, outlining dozens of specific requirements and restrictions. Every aspect of human civilization would come under hegemony control. Trade, communication, resource extraction, population movement, technological development, even cultural expression would be regulated by alien bureaucrats. This process has been refined through centuries of experience with thousands of species, Zexthul concluded. Cooperation will be rewarded, resistance will be punished. We are not cruel masters, but we are masters nonetheless. Accept this reality, and your species will find a comfortable place in the galactic community. Resist, and you will discover why 40,000 worlds chose to join us peacefully. The transmission ended, leaving Earth's leaders staring at blank screens. In the silence that followed, President Martinez was the first to speak. "Options, people. I need options, and I need them now." Secretary of Defense Williams cleared her throat. "Mr. President, our preliminary analysis suggests that this is either the most sophisticated hoax in human history, or we're facing a genuine alien threat with technology centuries ahead of our own." "Can we fight them?" Martinez asked bluntly. General Patterson shook his head. "Not conventionally. If that ship is even half as advanced as it appears, our most powerful weapons might not even register as hostile fire. It would be like throwing rocks at a tank." "What about nuclear weapons?" "We'd need to get them close enough to detonate, and that assumes nuclear explosions would even damage their hull. If they have force fields or energy shields like in the science fiction movies..." Patterson shrugged helplessly. Martinez turned to his science advisor, Dr. Sarah Chen. "Doctor, what's your assessment?" Dr. Chen had been studying the transmission intently. "Mr. President, the technology displayed in that broadcast is real. The quality of the holographic displays, the sophistication of their translation systems, the fact that they could hijack every communication system on Earth simultaneously, this is not something we could fake with current technology. So we're dealing with a real alien threat." "It appears so, sir." President Martinez stood and walked to the window overlooking the White House grounds. Outside, life was continuing normally. People were walking their dogs. Tourists were taking pictures. Children were playing in nearby parks. None of them knew that in 72 hours, their entire world might change forever. "Mr. President," General Patterson prompted. "Your orders, sir?" Martinez turned back to face the room. "Contact every allied nation. I want an emergency session of the UN Security Council in 6 hours. Contact NASA, ESA, all the space agencies. I want every piece of information we have about that ship and any others that might be coming. And our military posture? DEFCON 2 for now, but make it clear to all commands that we're not starting a fight we can't win. At least not yet. Martinez paused. Also, I want every scientist, every military strategist, every expert on asymmetric warfare that we can find. If these aliens think we're harmless primitives, maybe that's an advantage we can use. As the president's staff rushed to implement his orders, similar scenes were playing out in command centers around the world. The message had been received, translated, and understood in every major capital. Earth's leaders were facing the same stark reality. They were being conquered by a vastly superior force, and their options for resistance appeared to be non-existent. But humans had faced impossible odds before. Aboard the Harmony's Voice, Ambassador Zexthul was already planning the next phase of the integration process. The humans would spend their allotted time in denial, then anger, then bargaining, and finally, acceptance. It was the same pattern every primitive species followed when confronted with the reality of galactic politics. "Sir," reported the navigation officer, "the first wave of hegemony peacekeepers will arrive in 48 standard hours. Shall I inform them to prepare for standard occupation procedures?" "Yes, but tell them to expect minimal resistance. Our analysis suggests the humans will capitulate rather than face overwhelming force. They may be primitive, but they're not completely stupid." Zexthul settled back into his command chair. "In a week, this will all be over, and Earth will be just another peaceful member of the hegemony." He couldn't have been more wrong. In research facilities around Earth, scientists were already analyzing every frame of the alien transmission. Computer specialists were tracing the source of the hijacked signals. Military planners were developing scenarios for asymmetric warfare against a technologically superior enemy. And in a classified facility buried deep beneath the Nevada desert, a team of engineers was running final tests on a project that had been theoretical until just a few hours ago. Project Prometheus had been designed as humanity's answer to the theoretical threat of hostile alien contact. The aliens thought humans were harmless primitives. They were about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous creatures are the ones that everyone underestimates. 60 hours after the initial transmission, Ambassador Zexthul was beginning to experience what humans would call irritation. The primitive species was not responding as expected. Rather than immediate surrender, Earth's governments had gone completely silent. No communications, no negotiations, no desperate pleas for mercy. "Status report," he demanded from his aide. Vril consulted his datapad nervously. "Sir, human military forces have not stood down as ordered. In fact, our sensors indicate increased activity at military installations worldwide. They appear to be mobilizing." Zexthul's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "Mobilizing? Against what? Do they plan to throw their primitive missiles at our shields?" "Unknown, sir. But there's something else." Vril's tentacles trembled. "We've lost contact with 3 of our monitoring satellites. They simply stopped transmitting." "Equipment failure?" "That's what we thought initially. But then we lost 2 more. The pattern suggests they're being deliberately targeted." Before Zexthul could respond, the ship's tactical officer, a veteran Veltar named Kresh, spoke up from his station. "Sir, I'm detecting multiple launch signatures from the planet's surface. Appears to be chemical rockets, primitive, but numerous." "How many?" Kresh's 3 eyes widened as he studied his displays. "Over 200 launches in the past hour, sir, from locations across all major continents." Zexthul strode to the tactical display. The holographic representation of Earth's orbital space was now dotted with ascending trajectory lines. "What are they launching?" "Unknown payloads, sir. The chemical signatures match their standard rocket fuel, but the payload masses are inconsistent with any known human spacecraft design." Regardless, they pose no threat. Activate defensive screens and prepare to intercept anything that comes within range. What Zexthul didn't know was that those rockets weren't carrying weapons in any traditional sense. They were carrying messages. In launch facilities across Earth, teams of engineers and scientists had worked around the clock to modify existing rockets. Instead of satellites or supplies for the space station, these rockets carried a very different payload, data capsules designed to broadcast humanity's real capabilities to the galaxy. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the control room at Vandenberg Space Force Base, watching as another modified rocket lifted off into the dark sky. Around her, teams of specialists monitored the launch with grim determination. "Package 7 away clean," reported the launch director. "Broadcasting will begin once it reaches optimal orbital position." "Excellent," Dr. Chen replied. "How many packages have achieved successful orbit?" 143 confirmed in position and broadcasting. The aliens might be jamming our traditional communications, but they can't stop every transmitter we put up there. The packages weren't trying to communicate with the Veltar ship. Instead, they were broadcasting humanity's true history to the galaxy at large. Every war, every conflict, every act of violence and survival that had shaped human civilization. But more importantly, they were broadcasting something else, evidence of humanity's real capabilities, because the aliens had made a critical error in their analysis. They'd observed human technology, but missed the most important aspect of human nature. Humanity's greatest innovations came not from peace, but from war. Colonel Marcus Webb stood in a briefing room deep beneath NORAD, addressing a room full of military officers and scientists. Behind him, a large display showed the alien vessel holding position above Earth. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've had 60 hours to analyze the enemy transmission and develop our response. What we've learned is both encouraging and terrifying." He clicked a remote, and the display changed to show technical schematics. First, the encouraging news. Despite their obvious technological superiority, these aliens have made several critical miscalculations. They've assumed our weapons are limited to what they observed during their surveillance period. The display showed images of conventional missiles, tanks, and aircraft. They saw these systems and concluded we were primitives. What they didn't see were the black projects, the classified research, the weapons systems we've never had reason to deploy openly. Colonel Webb clicked again, and the display changed dramatically. Now it showed sleek, advanced designs that looked almost alien themselves. For the past 40 years, humanity has been preparing for threats we couldn't imagine. The threat of nuclear war drove us to develop defensive systems. The threat of global terrorism drove us to develop precision weapons. The threat of cyber warfare drove us to develop electronic countermeasures. A Navy admiral in the front row raised her hand. "Colonel, are you saying we actually have weapons that can threaten their ship?" "I'm saying we have weapons they don't know about. Whether they can threaten that ship remains to be seen, but we're about to find out." Meanwhile, aboard the Harmony's Voice, the situation was rapidly becoming more complex than Ambassador Zexthul had anticipated. "Sir," Vril reported urgently, "we're receiving transmissions from Hegemony Command. They're concerned about the broadcasts coming from this system." "What broadcasts?" "The humans have somehow managed to transmit detailed information about their species to the broader galaxy. Military histories, technological capabilities, cultural information. It's being picked up by monitoring stations across 17 sectors." Zexthul felt his confidence wavering for the first time. "Show me." The main display flickered and changed to show intercepts of the human transmissions. What Zexthul saw made his mandibles clatter in alarm. These weren't the crude, scattered conflicts he'd observed during the initial survey. The humans were broadcasting a comprehensive military history that spanned millennia of increasingly sophisticated warfare. The transmission showed human conflicts fought with weapons that shouldn't have been possible for their technology level. nuclear submarines that could hide undetected for months, stealth aircraft invisible to radar, precision-guided missiles that could travel thousands of kilometers to strike a target within meters of their intended destination. But more disturbing than the weapons were the tactics. Humans had developed strategies for fighting enemies with superior technology. Asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics, psychological operations, and something called mutually assured destruction that involved the deliberate threat of civilizational suicide as a deterrent. This can't be accurate, Zexthul muttered. Our surveillance clearly showed primitive chemical weapons and basic kinetic projectiles. Kresh looked up from his station. Sir, I think they were hiding their real capabilities. Look at this. The tactical display showed Earth's orbital space again, but this time with enhanced sensor readings. Those satellites we thought were primitive communication relays? They're showing energy signatures consistent with defensive weapons platforms. Impossible. Sir, I'm also detecting underground installations that weren't in our original survey. The humans appear to have significant military infrastructure hidden beneath their planetary surface. Before Zexthul could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the bridge. The ship's defensive systems had activated automatically, responding to perceived threats. Report, Zexthul demanded. Sir, I'm reading multiple target locks from the planet's surface. Something is actively scanning our vessel with what appears to be weapons-grade targeting systems. From where? Everywhere, sir. North America, Europe, Asia, even remote islands in their oceans. We're being painted by at least 40 separate targeting systems. Zexthul stared at the tactical display in growing alarm. The planet that had seemed so harmless just hours ago was suddenly bristling with hidden defenses. This has to be some kind of bluff. Primitive species don't possess the technology for effective space-to-surface targeting. His confidence was shattered a moment later when the ship's hull resonated with the distinctive whine of high-powered laser designation. Something on the planet's surface was not only targeting his ship, but was using coherent light weapons to do it. Evasive maneuvers, he ordered. Take us to a higher orbit. Sir, we're already at maximum safe orbital distance. Any higher, and we'll lose effective sensor coverage of the planet. Then activate full defensive screens and prepare for... The sentence was cut short as the ship lurched violently to one side. Emergency lighting bathed the bridge in red as damage alarms sounded throughout the vessel. What was that? Zexthul demanded, struggling to maintain his footing. Kresh was frantically working his console. Sir, we've been hit by some kind of kinetic projectile, mass driver technology, but far more sophisticated than anything in our analysis of human capabilities. Damage? Outer hull breach. Section 7 through 11. The projectile actually penetrated our secondary shielding. Zexthul felt his confidence crumble entirely. Hegemony shielding was designed to withstand weapons from species hundreds of years more advanced than these humans were supposed to be. How is that possible? His answer came in the form of another transmission from Earth, this one directed specifically at his vessel. The main display flickered and showed a human military officer in what appeared to be an underground command center. Attention, Hegemony vessel, the human said in perfectly accented Veltar. This is General Harrison of the Unified Earth Defense Command. Your 72-hour ultimatum has expired, and we decline your terms. Zexthul stepped forward. This is Ambassador Zexthul. You cannot possibly hope to resist the hegemony. Surrender now and your species will be treated with... I'm sorry, General Harrison interrupted, but I think there's been a misunderstanding. You seem to think you're in a position to make demands. The display shifted to show a tactical overview that made Zexthul's blood run cold. Earth's orbital space was filled with previously undetected weapons platforms, hidden behind sophisticated stealth technology. The planet's surface showed dozens of installations that were clearly military in nature, all of them actively targeting his ship. You see, Ambassador, General Harrison continued, When you announced your intentions to the entire planet, you made a critical error. You gave us time to prepare. More importantly, you gave us a reason to reveal capabilities we've kept hidden for decades. Another impact shook the Harmony's voice. This time from a different angle. Kresh reported that their shields were down to 60% efficiency. Those projectiles hitting your ship are just a demonstration, Harrison explained. Kinetic penetrators launched from railguns positioned around the globe. Each one carries the kinetic energy of a small nuclear weapon, but without the electromagnetic pulse or radiation signature. Zex Thul could barely speak. This is not possible. Our analysis showed that your species barely understands atomic theory. General Harrison smiled grimly. Your analysis was based on what we allowed you to see. Humanity learned long ago that the most effective defense against a superior enemy is to convince them you're not a threat until it's too late. The display changed again to show launch sites around Earth. Not the primitive chemical rockets the aliens had observed, but sleek, advanced systems that looked disturbingly similar to hegemony technology. We've been preparing for this day for over 50 years, Ambassador. Ever since we first detected signals indicating we weren't alone in the universe, we've developed weapons specifically designed to fight enemies with superior technology. Weapons that don't rely on brute force, but on intelligence, tactics, and the willingness to do whatever it takes to survive. Another alarm sounded on the bridge as Kresh reported multiple launch signatures from the planet. Sir, they're launching something large, multiple vehicles all heading directly for our position. Impossible, Zexathul whispered. They don't have faster-than-light travel. They don't need it, General Harrison replied, apparently monitoring their communications. Those missiles will reach you in approximately 8 minutes. Each one carries a nuclear warhead specifically designed to penetrate energy shields. We call them Prometheus missiles. Vril looked up from his console in panic. Sir, Hegemony Command is ordering us to withdraw immediately. They're receiving reports from other monitoring posts that human broadcasts are causing panic across 17 sectors. What kind of panic? The humans aren't just broadcasting their military capabilities, sir. They're broadcasting their history. Wars that lasted decades, weapons that could destroy entire planets, conflicts that killed millions of their own people. The other species in the hegemony are disturbed. Zexthul stared at the incoming missile tracks on his display. 8 minutes until impact. His ship could probably survive nuclear weapons, but if the humans had specifically designed these weapons to penetrate hegemony shields. Furthermore, General Harrison continued from the planet's surface, we should inform you that the Prometheus missiles are just the beginning. We have prepared significantly more aggressive responses if you refuse to leave our system. Such as? Harrison's smile became even grimmer. Are you familiar with the concept of mutually assured destruction, Ambassador? It's a military doctrine my species developed during our Cold War period. The idea is simple. If we're going to die, we're taking our enemies with us. The display showed a schematic that made Zexathul's organs clench in terror. It was a massive spacecraft, clearly of human design, but incorporating technology that shouldn't have been possible. We call it the Samson option, Harrison explained. If Earth falls, that ship launches with a very specific mission, to travel to every hegemony world we can identify and deliver our message personally. The ship carries detailed information about human military doctrine, human weapons technology, and most importantly, human psychology. It will broadcast this information to every species in your empire. That's insane! You would doom yourselves just to spread chaos? We would doom ourselves to ensure that humanity is remembered as something more than a footnote in your empire's history. Harrison leaned forward. You see, Ambassador, you made one crucial error in your assessment of our species. You thought our tendency toward violence was a weakness. It's not. It's our greatest strength. The countdown to missile impact continued. 6 minutes. Every species you've conquered was peaceful by galactic standards. They valued harmony, cooperation, stability. They surrendered because the cost of resistance was too high. Harrison paused. Humans are different. We've spent our entire evolutionary history fighting for survival. Against predators, against nature, against each other. We've turned warfare into an art form. 5 minutes. And now you've given us the greatest enemy we've ever faced. An alien empire that threatens our existence. You've united our species in a way nothing else ever could. The general's expression was cold as ice. Congratulations, Ambassador. You've just declared war on the most lethal species in the entire galaxy. Zexthul realized with growing horror that his perfect, routine first contact scenario had become a nightmare. The hegemony had just encountered something they'd never faced before, a species that preferred to die fighting rather than live in submission. 4 minutes to impact. Withdraw, he ordered his crew. Full retreat to the edge of the system. Signal Hegemony Command that we need immediate military support. As the Harmony's voice began to accelerate away from Earth, General Harrison had one final message. Tell your superiors that humanity is willing to negotiate, but only from a position of mutual respect. Send diplomats next time, not conquerors. And, Ambassador, if we see any hegemony warships approaching our system, we'll consider it an act of war. 3 minutes. We'll be waiting. The hegemony vessel disappeared into faster-than-light travel, just as the Prometheus missiles reached its former position. The weapons detonated harmlessly in empty space, but their message had been delivered. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, but they were far from helpless. 3 standard galactic months after the disastrous first contact with Earth, the Hegemony Council chamber buzzed with unprecedented tension. Representatives from 40,000 worlds had gathered for an emergency session, and for the first time in over a millennium, the topic wasn't expansion or trade disputes. It was survival. High Counselor Mordeth, an ancient crystalline whose species had founded the hegemony 8,000 years ago, stood at the central podium. Her voice resonated through translation matrices to reach every species present. Fellow counselors, she began, her crystalline form pulsing with subdued light. We face an unprecedented crisis. A single world has managed to destabilize 17 sectors of our empire, and the effects are spreading. Ambassador Zexthul stood in the designated area for witnesses, his mandibles clicking nervously. 3 months ago, he'd been a respected diplomat with an exemplary record. Now he was the being responsible for what historians were already calling the Great Awakening. Counselor Zexthul, Mordeth continued, please summarize the current situation for those who may not have received the full reports. Zexthul activated his personal display, showing a galactic map dotted with red indicators. Esteemed counselors, the human broadcasts have now reached over 3,000 systems. The information they transmitted wasn't just military data, it was philosophical. A murmur ran through the chamber. The hegemony prided itself on bringing peace and stability to the galaxy. Philosophy was supposed to be a settled matter. The humans documented not just their capacity for warfare, but their reasons for it. They broadcast detailed histories of their struggles for freedom, independence, and self-determination. They showed how a species could choose conflict over submission, death over slavery, chaos over imposed order. Counselor Vexhai, representative of the Aquatic Federation, spoke up from her water-filled booth. And what has been the response from our member worlds? Zexthul's display changed to show incident reports from across the galaxy. 743 worlds have filed formal protests against hegemony occupation policies. 12 sectors have reported increased resistance activity, and... He paused, his mandibles trembling. 17 worlds have declared complete independence. The chamber erupted in chaos. In 8,000 years, no member world had ever successfully left the hegemony. The very concept was considered impossible. High Counselor Mordeth restored order with a pulse of brilliant light. Continue your report, Counselor. The humans have continued broadcasting. Not threats or demands for territory, but education. They're teaching other species how to resist superior forces. Guerrilla tactics, psychological warfare, asymmetric strategies. They've turned rebellion into a science. Counselor Thekvar of the Hive Collective buzzed angrily. Then why haven't we simply destroyed them? One world against our entire fleet? Because, esteemed Counselor, Zexthul replied grimly, we tried. The display changed to show battle reports that made the assembled representatives shift uncomfortably. Fleet Admiral Korthak led a battle group of 30 ships to Earth system 2 months ago. The humans were waiting. The tactical displays showed the aftermath of what military historians would later call the Battle of Luna. 30 hegemony warships, representing the finest military technology in the galaxy, had engaged a ragtag collection of human vessels that shouldn't have lasted 5 minutes. The battle had lasted 3 days. The humans didn't try to meet us in open space combat, Zexthul continued. Instead, they used the asteroid belt, the gas giants' moons, even their own planet's gravity, well as weapons. They turned their entire solar system into a fortress. The display showed human ships, smaller and more primitive than hegemony vessels, darting between asteroids like metallic fish. But these weren't desperate, evasive maneuvers. They were coordinated attacks, using the environment itself as cover and leverage. They also employed weapons we'd never encountered before, not energy beams or kinetic projectiles, but viruses, computer viruses specifically designed to infiltrate and corrupt hegemony systems. Counselor Meltera of the Silicon Collective sparked with alarm. Impossible. Hegemony systems are protected by quantum encryption. The humans didn't break the encryption, Zexthul explained. They bypassed it entirely. They created programs that convinced our computers to voluntarily accept the viral code. Social engineering, they called it. They made our own systems trust them. The battle reports continued. Human fighters that sacrificed themselves to disable much larger hegemony ships. Missiles that seemed to miss their targets only to detonate in precise patterns, creating debris fields that trapped entire squadrons. And most disturbing of all, human warriors who continued fighting even when their ships were destroyed, using personal spacecraft and even vacuum suits to attack hegemony vessels. The humans lost over 60% of their fleet, Zexthul reported. But they destroyed or disabled 22 of our ships and forced the remainder to retreat. More importantly, they broadcast the entire battle to the galaxy. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The hegemony fleet hadn't just been defeated by primitives. They'd been outfought, outmaneuvered, and outsmarted by a species that was supposed to be barely above Stone Age technology. High Counselor Mordeth spoke into the silence. And what has been the response from our member worlds? That's where the real crisis lies, esteemed Counselor. Zexthul's display changed to show population statistics. The humans didn't just broadcast the battle, they broadcast interviews with their warriors, beings who chose to fight impossible odds rather than surrender, pilots who sacrificed themselves to save their comrades, commanders who refused to retreat even when facing certain death. The statistical displays showed something that terrified the hegemony leadership more than any weapon: inspiration. Recruitment for resistance movements has increased by over 3,000% across the Empire. Species that have been peaceful hegemony members for centuries are suddenly producing revolutionaries. The humans have shown them that resistance is possible. Counselor Yindar of the Peaceful Collective stood to speak. Surely this is temporary. Once the excitement fades, order will be restored. Zexthul activated another display, this one showing communication intercepts. I'm afraid not, esteemed Counselor. The humans have established formal diplomatic relations with the rebel worlds. They're sharing technology, tactics, and most dangerously, philosophy. The intercepts showed human diplomatic messages to various species across the galaxy, not offers of alliance or trade agreements, but something far more subversive, the idea that every species had the right to determine its own fate. They call it the Terran Doctrine, Zexthul continued. The principle that no species should be forced to accept governance they didn't choose. They're not trying to build an empire to rival ours. They're trying to convince our empire to dissolve itself voluntarily. Before the council could respond, an urgent communication alert echoed through the chamber. High Counselor Mordeth authorized the transmission, and the chamber's displays showed a familiar figure. General Harrison of Earth's Unified Defense Command. "Greetings, Hegemony Council," Harrison said, his translated words reaching every representative. "I apologize for interrupting your session, but we felt it was important to address some misconceptions about humanity's intentions." Mordeth's crystalline form pulsed with controlled anger. "General Harrison, your species has violated countless laws of galactic peace. You stand accused of inciting rebellion across 17 sectors." Harrison smiled calmly. "Respectfully, Counselor, we stand accused of sharing information. Last I checked, education wasn't a crime under galactic law. You have actively encouraged resistance against lawful hegemony authority. We have shared our own experiences with species who asked for our perspective. If those experiences happen to include successful resistance against overwhelming odds, that's simply historical fact." Counselor Thekvar buzzed forward. "Your actions threaten the stability of the entire galaxy." "Do they?" Harrison asked. "Or do they threaten the stability of an empire built on the principle that might makes right?" The general activated his own display, showing a very different view of galactic politics. "For 8,000 years, the hegemony has expanded by conquering peaceful species. You've never encountered a civilization that preferred to fight rather than submit. You've built an empire of the willing to avoid exactly the kind of conflict we represent." He was right, and everyone in the chamber knew it. The hegemony's expansion had always targeted species that valued peace over freedom, stability over independence. They'd never encountered a species like humanity that seemed to thrive on conflict and resistance. "But here's what your intelligence reports missed," Harrison continued. "Humans aren't just good at warfare. We're good at inspiring others to fight for themselves. It's what we do. It's what we've always done." The display showed historical examples from Earth's past. Revolutions sparked by human ideals spreading to other nations. Independence movements that copied human tactics and philosophy. The American Revolution inspiring the French Revolution. The concept of democracy spreading across continents. You're not dealing with a single rebellious world, counselors. You're dealing with an idea that's more dangerous than any weapon we could build. The idea that freedom is worth fighting for. High Counselor Mordeth stepped forward. "What do you want, General Harrison? What are humanity's terms?" Harrison's expression became serious. "We don't want anything from you, Counselor. We want something for the galaxy. We want every species to have the right to choose their own government, their own destiny, their own level of involvement with galactic civilization. That's impossible. The galaxy requires order, structure, unified authority." "Does it?" Harrison challenged. "Or does it require cooperation? Earth is willing to be part of a galactic community, Counselor, but as an equal partner, not a conquered territory." Zexthul found himself speaking before he realized it. "And if the hegemony refuses?" Harrison's smile returned, but it wasn't hostile. It was confident. "Then you'll find out exactly how lethal humanity can be, not just in warfare, but in spreading ideas. We've had 3 months to establish communications with every rebel world in your empire. We've taught them our tactics, our strategies, our philosophy." The display changed to show a network spanning the galaxy. Thousands of worlds connected by human communication networks, sharing information and coordination. The question isn't whether you can defeat Earth in battle, counselors. The question is whether you can defeat the idea of freedom spreading across 40,000 worlds. The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. The hegemony faced a choice: adapt to a galaxy where species demanded self-determination, or fight an endless series of rebellions inspired by human example. High Counselor Mordeth finally spoke. "You're asking us to dismantle an empire that has brought peace to the galaxy for 8 millennia. No, Counselor," Harrison replied. "We're asking you to transform it into something better, a true confederation of free worlds, united by choice rather than conquest." "And if we refuse?" Harrison's expression became deadly serious. "Then you'll discover what humans are really capable of when we're fighting for something we believe in. Not just our own survival, but the freedom of every sentient species in the galaxy." The transmission ended, leaving the Hegemony Council in stunned silence. 6 months later, the Treaty of Terra was signed in Earth orbit. The Galactic Hegemony was dissolved and replaced with the Confederation of Free Worlds. Every species was given the choice to join voluntarily or maintain complete independence. 47 worlds chose independence. 39,953 chose to join the Confederation. And humans, the species that had been dismissed as harmless primitives, became known throughout the galaxy as the Liberators. The beings who had proven that sometimes the most powerful weapon in the universe is the simple idea that freedom is worth fighting for. Ambassador Zex Thul, now serving as the Veltar representative to the Confederation Council, often reflected on how spectacularly wrong his initial assessment had been. Humans weren't the most lethal species in the galaxy because of their weapons or their tactics. They were the most lethal because they could convince others to die for principles rather than live in submission. And in a galaxy that had forgotten what it meant to fight for freedom, that made them the most dangerous force imaginable.